Good evening, everyone. Today's the 8th and final video lecture of the 8-week course. A few housekeeping things first, before I get into the last lecture here. I want to apologize for my tardiness in getting things graded. I've just been super busy. There's no excuse for that. I'm just traveling and starting this team in Texas and also teaching at TU. So I'm trying to get caught up as quickly as possible, so you guys know perhaps where you stand. If you have any questions about that, or about anything, I try to get back to people's emails as quickly as possible, but the best way to reach me is through text message. Just identify yourself. If you do so, you're free to do so at any time. My number is on the syllabus, which is, located in Blackboard. If you haven't already noticed, I posted the second article review as well as the executive summary assignment in module 2. Those should be the last things that we do for the course, other than the last quiz over this lecture and the previous one, which I will also post this week. And then, of course, try to get everything graded before I'm required to enter your letter grades for the course. These are difficult formats to try to teach and learn and engage. And, I wish, I could get to know you guys in person and be in the same room with you and ask questions and have vigorous debates. I want to say that overall, what I've graded so far is good quality work. I think overall, you guys are good writers, have a pretty good grasp of the material. I don't expect anything less, but I just want to let you know that my impression of the students in the classes so far have been very, very positive. So appreciate your hard work and diligence and patience with me getting through the semester, and hope more than anything that you learned something, right? I know you want to get a good letter grade, and I want you to have a good letter grade, but I also hope that you learn some things that are valuable to you as a person, maybe for your education, of course, and your future career. So I think that's it on the housekeeping things. Appreciate you watching here. Again, text me if you are urgent about something, or I'll try to get back to emails as quickly as possible. Of course, things are coming to a head everywhere else too. So uh, my time is very spoken for. So again, that's no excuse. I just want to let you know that I'm going to get to things as quickly as possible. All right. So, what we're going to wrap things up with in this semester is we're talking about marketing, which is under communications. And just to review a little bit, you may remember, I can't remember which particular lecture, but when I've built departments for sports teams in the past, I always put marketing under the umbrella of communications, right? So, different teams sort of organize their or front office is different. And there's no sort of definitive set right way. My personal philosophy is that communications is a department that sort of overarches all these sub departments or sub task departments within that. One of those would be marketing. One of those would be community relations, which is a type of marketing. One would be public and media relations, right? Obviously, you can see those are all forms of communication. And then really those staff members, the folks that work in those particular areas, really should be talking to on a regular basis, interfacing with those that are charged with going out and generating revenue, which of course is a big takeaway from this class, right? Can't do anything without revenue. Can't do all the things we want to do without revenue in the world, in our lives. Personally, income, but for organizations, we need revenue. Ideally, we turn a profit, but that's not always the case. But you can't do anything without revenue. And so the communications wing of your organization should always be in lockstep, and in my opinion, taking direction from those that are charged with generating revenue. So if the revenue directors and vice presidents and whatever titles they have say, look, here's what our ownership has been tasked, or here's what we are setting as a revenue goal this year. Here's all the different ways we generate revenue. Now, here's all the different ways we need to communicate to target audiences to promote those things so that they take action in those different revenue stream lanes. So therefore, let's interact here to communications department, marketing department, advertising department, digital marketing department, social media department. Let's figure out what messages we're going to put out there to reach the kind of audiences that we want, that ideally that engages them, creates that demand. Really, that's what marketers do again, creates that demand and ultimately encourages or incentivizes somebody to sort of take a particular action. So the communications wing and the sales wing should always be in lockstep. And again, in my opinion, the communication wing should be taking direction from the sales department, because if those aren't interconnected, what's the point? You don't want a bunch of voices and messages going out on here that don't align with what the revenue generating side of things is doing. I think that makes sense, but you'd be surprised how often that I've experienced that that doesn't take place, or there's not enough of cooperation or regular communication. They're too siloed a lot of times. And so when it works the best, and those leaders in the area that lead these organizations, again, my personal philosophy, need to make sure that that communication is ongoing, regular, and thorough, and that's the only way it works, right? So, what are we talking about? Promotional marketing, communications, public relations, and emerging technologies. We'll talk about really again, technology is such a big part of what I teach in all these classes. I'm no technological expert, but of course, you guys all understand that technologies and emerging technologies are what helps fuel the spur or fuel the growth in communications and different methods and means, including the one I'm communicating with you here now, which is not something I used, 20, 25 years ago when I was a wee lad. So some of the stuff you guys, I'm sure, have learned in other classes and other courses. That's okay. It's always good to review, and I can give my sort of take on them. So the objectives that we're going to get through tonight was to understand and explain the role of promotional marketing mix in sports marketing specifically, and articulate the nature of a sport promotional mix compared to, say, traditional strategies. Identify the role of public and media relations as well as community relations, which isn't listed there, but we'll talk about that. And of course, talk about the importance of social media, which is ubiquitous and just so important to how people communicate and engage with user groups, and how it relates to the sports promotional mix. And recognize and understand the best practices in implementing effective sport promotional mix strategies, which I kind of touched on there in my opening diatribe before we even went to this slide. Obviously, promotional mix is a combination of tools that we as sport marketers and managers use to communicate with the public or different forms of public. I know that's sort of an old quote there from Mr. and Miss Shank from 2028, but it still stands to reason, right? Promotional marketing. I think it's fair to stop here and talk about, well, what's the difference between advertising and marketing and promotions, and what's promotional marketing as opposed to promotional mix as opposed to the marketing mix. They're not necessarily completely interchangeable, but I do like the words promotional marketing. Sometimes I'll use marketing sponsorship. Advertising is a part of your promotional marketing mix, although that's, again, more of a traditional way of things. People that invest money in sports sponsorships, which touches back to our previous lecture, also use that as part of their overall marketing, of which some of that they use traditional advertising, which is the best way to define that is buying television ads, satellite or terrestrial radio ads, print ads, things that we would call sort of old school methods of advertising, which are big, broad, banned ways of doing things. Yes, even when you buy an advertisement on a television program, you understand that that program reaches a certain particular kind of audience. But you may spread your advertising across all kinds of different channels and programs, which is casting a wide net. So I call it broadcasting. It's broadcasting, where social media and other forms are more narrow casting. But again, the promotional mix is just all the things that we use as marketers to try to get our messages out and communicate to our target audiences. So how do you use these communication channels, and how do you design them to achieve what your objectives are? Reinforce the brand image. What's a brand? Right. We haven't talked a whole lot in this class. I love to have this discussion when I have in-person classes about what a brand is, right? Um, Brand is not a logo. You guys maybe heard this before in other classes. A brand isn't an image, really. Well, I take it back. It's a perception image, but it's not a logo. It's not a mark. It's not a design. So don't confuse, let's say, this Polo logo as the brand. The logo represents what the brand is. And the brand is nothing but what the promises it makes in our head when we see the logo about what it's supposed to do, right? When you see the Nike swoosh, what is that brand and what does it represent? The swoosh is just a representation of the brand itself, right? Just like you guys have your own brand and how you look and what you wear and how you dress and how you speak is a way to promote your brand, which is really just a way of communicating to the world what you want the world to know about you. And that perception of how they feel about you or how one feels about Nike or Apple or Google or Facebook or any of these other brands is really just the promise in our mind of what we think they're supposed to do for us in terms of a good, a service, of value. It's very, very hard to build a brand. It's even harder to sort of keep a brand, right? There are obviously people that spend millions of dollars and lots of experts on figuring out how do you build a brand. Yes, a logo, marks, colors, fonts, vocabulary, all those things around that are, again, methods and tools to buttress what you're trying to convey your brand is. But once you have a brand out there, of course, and if it's working for you, you have to fight to maintain it. And in a little thing could jeopardize what people's, again, perception or promises in their mind of what your logo represents as your brand. That's why a lot of times companies do a brand refresh, and that's not just always about a logo change, although it usually accompanies that. It's about, you know what? Somehow our brand is not working like it used to. Our messages aren't working. Maybe we need to look at all this and we need to have a brand refresh because we have to put a new promise in people's minds. So when they hear us or see a message from us or see a mark or see a logo, it conveys what we actually want. It's right. There's that term communication, messaging. Meaning is really what it comes down to. Communication is about conveying meaning, proper meaning. And there's art and science behind all of this, right? So yeah, we want to reinforce a brand image or perception, but our marketing objectives, of course, are about trying to drive demand for our products and services. Right. Social media, of course, has provided marketers with a direct interactive communication narrowcasting channel for reaching different kinds of target audiences, target consumers, customers, whatever word you want to hear. I always tend to use customers more than consumers. I mean, there's a lot of dry terms out there. Fans, of course, when we're talking about in the sports world, fans is the best and proper word to use. Supporters might be another thing you say. We're going to talk about stakeholders in a minute and communication with stakeholders, but customers, consumers, fans, stakeholders, supporters. That's what we're trying to reach, right? And of course, social media is a big part of the mix, which looks a little bit something like this. Again, this isn't doesn't capture everything, but it's a good diagram here to show you uh, what all could be involved. And you can see how much, because of all this, imagine trying to coordinate your messaging across all these different mix tools, right? What are the marketing objectives and desired outcomes, right? Again, my opinion is when we identify who we're trying to get our messaging to and we communicate that meaning to them and we do it properly, it creates a demand for something we're asking to do. We want them to look at our website, right? We want to pay attention to a broadcast. We want to get them to take a poll. We want them to listen to a podcast. We want them to buy a ticket. We want them to consider buying gifts from a merchandise shop for Christmas. All those are our eventual outcomes, right? We want to create demand through all those things. So the desired outcomes eventually is what? Take action, right? Action steps, calls to action, CTAs. You've heard that before, I bet. Well, all these, of course, are ways that brands and then, of course, teams also use to reach their target audiences, to try to reach those objectives and produce those desired outcomes, of course. We'll get into most of these things as we have already. Advertising specifically, right? Whoops, sorry. Advertising is intended to persuade consumers, customers, fans to engage in purchase behaviors. Not wrong, but as I mentioned a couple of slides before, there are steps in between there. To me, advertising, again, in its traditional form, is about reaching the masses. Again, anywhere and everywhere you can try to place an ad in front of your most desired audience. Men 18 to 24, women, kids, old people, whatever it is. If you ever stay home and watch television during the day and you see the ads that come on, and then it goes right for a particular kind of demographic, people they think are at home watching advertising that day. But even then, you're not always going to reach the desired target audience. There's going to be what we call spillage, what we might call fluff, where it reaches a certain audience that you were never intending to reach. And that's just, there's margins on that. You just have to understand that that's what's happening. And this is true with all forms of marketing and advertising. But advertising, to me, is, yes, of course, intended to persuade consumers, buyers, to engage in purchase behaviors, take action to buy something. But more than anything else, it's about to create awareness. It's about creating frequency. I can't remember what it is. We could look. I probably should have before here, but what science says, how many messages we as humans now have to hear before we even consider taking action. And before that, we have to consider even doing research now, because there's so many ways that we can look at Google reviews or research websites or ask our friends or look at influencers. Heck, before we make any sort of purchase, there's enough out there we can actually do our digging. So advertising really is about, hey, take a look at us. Hey, and again, there's a lot of steps in between. Hey, we see a message and I'm going to pick up the phone or go to the store and buy something. There's so many steps in between there. So I argue that now advertising is about, again, getting us to take action, to start consideration of a purchase, much less make a purchase, right? Because we have so many tools at our disposal, right? We all want to make sure we're getting the most bang for our buck. And if we feel we have, again, data, information, knowledge is power, right? Power to make informed decisions so that our money is used wisely, and ultimately we get what we need and services us and makes our lives better, right? Advertising should be designed with marketing objectives, of course, in the target markets as a central focus. No different than marketing. Advertising, yes, of course, is working with your marketing objectives to make sure you know where your advertising is going to be and what those messages are. So characteristics, right, of effective advertising: you want to focus on a target market. You want to link to achievement of marketing objectives, of course. Right? That's, again, where you get the evaluation and the feedback to find out if it's working. If not, you make adjustments. Obviously, it needs to be clear and concise. How many times, and do this as an experiment sometime, how many times you ever watched an ad and go, no, what was that product for? That's bad advertising. I challenge people who make billboards, but sometimes when people design graphics or artwork in front of them, it looks pretty good on here. And then it was translated to a sign or a billboard. It doesn't look as good as you think it is, because it becomes the letters become smaller. A lot of times I see really bad advertising signage or messaging on television or radio that isn't clear and concise, and you're left wondering, I can't even remember what the heck they were talking to me about, what kind of, I don't know who that brand is, and I don't know what they're selling me, right? Obviously, again, a lot of times you're trying to do this in 30 seconds, 15 seconds. Nowadays, 10 seconds, our attention spans are getting so small. Let's think about how hard it is, how challenging it is for marketing and advertising professionals to illustrate in those snippets of time any sort of product or service benefits and features that might even interest you to start taking a look. And even before that, do we have to be in the market for something? I'm a weird eater, right? I'm a pescatarian, so I haven't eaten, chickens or cows in a long, long time. Nothing against that. I just choose not to. So somebody serves up, no pun intended, an ad in front of me to go buy the best burger in town, it's not going to be effective on me, right? So there's a lot of that. Again, can't fix everything like that, but you may try to convey all the right benefits and features of your product or service the best you can, it's still going to fall on deaf ears because I'm not in the market for the message in the first place. It's why it's really scary, as we know, as we talk about things out loud and our phone is listening. Next thing you know, you might look and go, wait a second, I was just talking about that. Now I'm seeing ads for that because now they think I'm in the market for that. Really spooky. I'm sure you guys have seen that kind of stuff. As long as we know it's out there, but that's what's happening, right? I don't know if you guys ever see that movie Minority Report with Tom Cruise. It was out maybe 10, 12 years ago. I can't remember, but go watch it. Talk about how, customize ads as he walks through corridors and halls of malls, and just ads are popping up for everybody that walks by. That's where it's going, right? If we're not there already. But again, how do you cut through that clutter to get the right benefit features of any product and service so that it gets me to take action to consider, then research, then make a purchase decision? Obviously we have to have something that we as marketers or advertisers want to differentiate what our products and services for any competition about why it's better. I will say that I believe the number one emotion used in most advertising and marketing is fear. And I'm not talking about crazy fear, but do an experiment sometime when you're watching a game or television for a couple of hours, and every ad you see, whether it's on your phone or on computer or on television, write down how often what they're trying to do is incentivize you to do something out of fear of missing out, fear of not getting the latest, coolest thing, fear of missing out on the deal, fear of missing out on a deadline, actual fear of what people breaking into your house or your car getting busted or you're running out of money because you can't afford the insurance. I mean, think about it. Fear is the number one emotion that's used. And to differentiate from one's competition, a lot of times you have to say, well, here's how we're better. We're going to alleviate your fear, or we're going to take care of your fear. You shouldn't be afraid of what we're offering as much as you should somebody else. So that's just an example. And ideally, you want it to be repetitive and memorable. Think about Super Bowl ads or anything ads that have lasted the test of time. And that's what advertising professionals out there are doing all the time, trying to get that one, what back then they didn't know, but what we might call going viral now. It's memorable. Oh my gosh, that's hilarious, or that's moving to me, or did you see that? And then you want to repeat that, right? That's why slogans are important, right? Taglines that are repeatable and digestible, what we might call sound bites, or what I would call in music a little hook, right? We're always looking for a hook. What's the hook? That's something that's repetitive and memorable that gets inside of us and helps us remember. And ultimately, over time, leads to us, again, doing something, consideration, research, taking action to purchase, evaluation, and repeating that. Oh, I like it. I tried it once. It works for me. I'll keep buying it. Public relations and models. With new media, makes public relations both easier and more difficult. I would say that's true for all marketing as well. Social media makes it easier to reach the consumer, yet may hinder the ability to develop long-term meaningful relationships. Have a few guys that in the first article review, are talking about how, and I feel this with music, is that technology is a wonderful thing, allows us to get our messages out there and hone in on our whatever we want to our target market, our target audience, but then it's easy for everybody else to do it too. So maybe as before, there weren't as many platforms to get your message out, and it was harder to reach that audience because there was a limited number of channels it was showed. Now the channel market's gotten a lot wider, right? But because it's easier, there's so many more people in there, right? Think about how many times every day you're hit up with some particular marketing message. So, how do those sport entities, organizations, use new media in their public relations efforts to reach the public, but figure out ways to still make those interactions and that transactional relationship meaningful for the consumer, for the audience that you're trying to reach. I think a lot of people, social media would say, no, it helps us engage more, helps us engage deeper, it helps us create more meaningful relationships. I'm not saying that. I agree with that. What I'm saying is that's what everybody else is trying to do. So company X is trying to engage with me and create a long-term meaningful relationship with some of this company X and Y and A, B, and C, and D, and all the way through W. So it's tougher that way, is kind of what I think the point the authors are making here. In the old days, it was a one-way model. Sport organizations, athletes, everybody was so reliant on the media outlets, broadcast media and television, newspapers to get their message out because that was where it's the only way it could. People bought newspapers and had subscriptions, and there was only 3 or 4 television channels, and I don't know how many radio stations are. There wasn't all this digital stuff that we have now. And so you could sort of dictate, you could convey whatever message you want to the public. They couldn't convey any messages back very rarely. I could write a few letters and maybe stop you and you're walking out of your office. But it was more of a monologue. Let us tell you what we want you to know. Now with these, same thing with athletes had to sort of rely on their sports organizations to hopefully protect them or help mold their image, right? There was nothing that they could use on their own unless they, I guess, were going out and buying their own personal ads and on television and newspapers to promote their personal brand. Nowadays, as we know, everybody has a way in the palm of their hand. You're your own media manager, right? You're your own media mogul, thanks to inventors of these kinds of technologies. So now public relations is more of a two-way relationship. It's not a monologue, it's a dialogue. We give information, you give it back, we take it, we give it back, and it's back and forth, right? Athletes can no longer have to rely on their team to get their messages out to the fans. They can do it on their own. We see it every day, good and bad, right? I think you guys can see that there's good things to that and not so good things. And old guys, and old timers like, oh, I wish it was back in the old days, and I understand that to a lot of degree, but maybe younger folks are just used to the way it is now, and it's not going back anyway. You can't put the genie back in the bottle. It just is what it is. The question is, how do you embrace it? How do you use it for your advantage? But it is very, very challenging, as you can imagine. What are some audiences for activities of a sport organization or a marketing public relations department? The authors say in the slide the term stakeholder or public may be used to classify groups of individuals to which the organization may wish to or need to communicate. Again, could be a target audience, target market, but stakeholder is a little bit different. Stakeholder is maybe somebody that's already invested, right? The target market is maybe somebody is trying to reach people that you're trying to engage deeper, get more involved. A stakeholder is typically somebody that's already invested. And we're talking about a shareholder, not somebody that's owns stock, but a stakeholder. Somebody has a stake in who you are as an organization and what you do. So I've already bought in to some degree, or your success. I have a stake in how you, the sports team, your organization affects me. And that could be, so people on this end that have a stake in how the sport organization or sport team does is what we're talking about in terms of stakeholders. Publics or groups of people that are the public that we're using public relations for. Yes, stakeholders are one of them. So again, this is just saying some scholars don't use the terms interchangeably. Stakeholders are used to describe large groups of people who hold similar standing to the organization. Similar standing being, again, they all got something to gain or lose from their investment and their connection with the organization, right? And then publics are specific groups of people within stakeholder groups. So if you have, I don't know, let me think of an example. Fans, fans are all stakeholders. Okay, but some fans have been with the team long term. In this example, long term fans that have been with the team and hold season tickets, let's say for 15 years, as opposed to that just came on board yesterday. Fans are all stakeholders, but within that group, you might be trying to reach mothers, moms that make decisions in their household for purchase. So we're gonna try to get messages to that particular stakeholder group, right? That public within that stakeholder group. So people ask me all the time, well, who's your target market? Working for sports organizations and sports teams. Who's your target market? And I go, everybody. I mean, and doesn't mean, I don't even say it to mean flip. Everybody could be benefit, I believe, from what I'm trying to offer from being a sports team. The messages are different. And what they're looking for in terms of benefits, they being the fans or the stakeholder, is different. But everybody is a potential customer. It's not always the case with every product, but sports, it is. That's why there's so many messages about, hey, we're having a kids' night or a senior night or a young adults night, or I mean, there's just all different ways that you think, okay, great, I want to reach all those demographics. Ultimately, after you get data, you're going to figure out, well, here's kind of where the core of our fans come from. But that doesn't mean that we're only wanting to stick to that. We understand that there are people out here that we need to engage deeper with that have a different interest, different uh, have a different stake in the game than this group here, and therefore we have to create messages that engage with that group too. So again, that's what you can see. It's challenging, right? Do you want to engage with them because you're trying to grow your audience size on the margins, or do you want to make sure you spend all your time and energy shoring up, solidifying this core group of people in the middle, right? I used to work for a hockey team years ago, and we had a booster club. And you might also consider in soccer, diehard supporters groups. And sometimes I'd say, I'll take 30,000 of them. And the other times I'm like, man, I wish this group was smaller, right? So that benefits, right? Do I want to engage with them more and grow more of this? Or are there audiences and stakeholders out here I need to engage with more and get deeper engaged with them? And where do we spend our time and energy? What's important? Again, those philosophies and determinations change based on leadership and different factors. Multiple public groups make up larger stakeholder groups. College athletic department identifies several publics, all of which are important to the operation of the department, of course. Alumni, current students, student athletes is a different group, coaches, faculty. I work for, 2 universities right now, and in the college athletic department, I mean, think about the difference between the football department and, let's say, the lacrosse team or the rowing team, right? They're all part of the athletic department, but they have um, different stakes within the athletic department, right? So how are messages, their publics, how is the department or the university in this example reaching them? What are their messages? What are they trying to do? I get offers for free tickets all the time to try to go watch athletes because I'm a faculty, and there's tricks you can do all those kinds of things to try to get me to be engaged. But a message to me as a faculty member is different than somebody else, say, who's in administration or rank and file staff or anything like that. Public's compartmentalized as customers, producers, enablers, limiters. Don't worry about that based on unique relationships. I mean, we could go into details about why that's in there, within publics or stakeholder groups. Some are producers, some are consumers or customers, some just enable, and some limit, right? And again, if you think about just those categories of publics, the messages are different, right? What's your message to an enabler, a stakeholder enabler, as opposed to a limiter stakeholder? What's your message to a customer, a fan, a consumer, as opposed to a producer, maybe a sponsor, right? All of them have unique relationships attached to your organization. All of them are different stakeholders that have a stake in what you do. And therefore, you have to communicate with them in a way that reaches them and allows you as an organization to benefit from those relationships, and vice versa. Always has to be a two-way street. Of course, that's the win-win. But you can see why messaging is so important when you're trying to identify those different groups and what you need them to do. Again, as we talked about here. Fans, enablers serve as regulators, agencies, limiters, which can somehow adversely affect the operation of the organization. Naysayers, again, you don't have to worry about this too much. I'm not going to ask you, but you can see how our authors are trying to basically tell us that these types of publics and what their role is as stakeholders to your organization is how it's important, again, to how you determine what you say to them, what messaging you get to them, what behavior you're trying to influence. I know this isn't a management class, but when I teach sport management classes, I have a manager or trainer, coach, teacher, whatever our job is to influence the behavior of those that we lead to try to reach objectives for the organization efficiently and effectively. This is no different, right? How do we use messaging, communication, the promotional mix to influence the behavior we want with the right meaning that's conveyed to hopefully achieve our outcomes that we want? It's very tricky, right? The vocabulary is important. So many things, communication wise, it's important on how you convey meaning and engage with people to get them to feel connected. What's community relations? I totally agree with this. Frequently overlooked as a significant and influential area of public relations. In fact, when I built departments, as I talked about, communications, marketing, community relations, public relations, and you might have community relations under that. And not that it's less significant, it's just it makes sense for it to be housed there, it being the department. Um, Designed to enhance the sport organization's ability to develop those long-term two relationships with key publics, and those would be um, community groups, obviously, uh, stakeholders within the community in which you operate. Most importantly, to try to position yourself as an organization in the community as one of something that's positive, that contributes to a positive way to your community. Right? Sports teams and organizations ask so much of a market, of a community. Come to our games, buy our stuff, pay attention to me. We suck up a lot of oxygen, and the bigger teams, the bigger they are, the more oxygen they suck up. And of course, there's competitions in every major market with not just other teams, but all kinds of forms of entertainment, right? So when we ask so much of the community, it's important that we have good community relations back. And typically that is understood as being how we engage the community in charitable ways, sustainable corporate social responsibility, right? How are we involved in the community so that we serve certain causes out there that we as an organization believe in, we think are important to the community, and how do we position ourselves in a way that we can positively influence and positively affect what they do for the greater good. And a typical form of community relations is player appearances or autograph sessions or donations to charitable fundraisings. You might donate tickets and a jersey package to a local fundraiser for somebody, and allows them to generate money to do the good things they do in that community. And you can use your power and influence and standing in the community to help. Um, I think it's so important for sport organizations to do that. One, again, I think it's the right thing to do. It's also the right business thing to do. And there's, again, as you guys have heard me say, those are always connected. Um, the more you can do that, the more you can tell those kinds of stories, again, harkening back to our first article review, tell the stories about how we engage. Now, you shouldn't be out there tooting your own horn and patting yourself on the back about how great you are. That can seem a little disingenuous and unauthentic. So one has to be careful there. But if you do it in an authentic, thought about, thoughtful way, strategic way, it's a very, very powerful and meaningful area of your communications department's arsenal. And there are so many teams that just think it's an afterthought. Get tons of donations come in. We'll just donate here and there. Yeah, we'll send a couple players out. No, no, no. And so they don't hire somebody to manage or direct their community relations with. I think is a huge mistake. I know there's budgets, but I would argue that if a sport organization has the means and they don't hire a robust group of people to manage their community relations endeavors, I think they're missing the boat. Investor relations and employee relations, again, these are just different stakeholder groups, different publics on how we as sport organizations relate to them. Obviously, investor relations will have to do with anybody that has a financial stake in the company, right? They're looking for ROI in a pure financial way. Some thought of an exit at some point, whether I want to sell my shares now or my grandkids are going to sell their shares somewhere down the road, right? So you can tell the things you communicate with a potential investor or an investor in your group is different than you would communicate to a fan or a member of the media or a vendor, something like that, right? That's why a lot of public companies, of course, get together every quarterly and they have people that prepare these briefs and they give they give a presentation on the state of the company. And I think it's important for sport organizations to do the same thing. I remember I used to have to make presentations and go in there and do the presentation of the dog and pony show in front of owners all the time about, hey, here's where we are. Here's where things stand. This is what we're planning to do this year. Here's where we need your help. This is what we expect. It's not fun. It's scary sometimes. And those folks don't always know what you're doing every single day, down and dirty, and don't quite have a grasp of all the things you've got to do on a daily basis. And you sometimes only get very brief and infrequent audiences with your investor group, ownership group. And so you got to make the most of it. and again, it talks about in practitioners of investor relations, people that communicate with that group obviously have to have expertise in finance. So it's true. Typically, those people are accountants or CFOs or top executives, people that show balance sheets and pro formas and projections and cost analyses and things like that. Employee relations again are typically in the HR department, right? Very, very important. The human capital is the most important part of any organization. As long as we have humans doing work, and I would argue that even when bots and robots are going to take over, as long as there are humans around doing work, whether that's building a robot or working on it as a tech or whatever, as long as humans are involved in work and this human capital, it is the most important asset you have. And so if you don't invest in really good employee human relations, again, you're missing the boat. It can cause so many problems. And I think there are a lot of times there are sport organizations as well as others that underfund or undervalue that kind of thing. There is a culture in the sports world where there's a feeling of churn and burn. I don't want to sound too negative, but I've seen it. Not all are this way, but it's we hire young, we go cheap, we burn them out, they're gone, and a new class will come in, almost like pro athletes themselves. Um, Athletes who get paid to do what they do should not have any loyalty to the organization, and the organization should not have any loyalty to them. Why? Because there's a fresh class coming out every single year, and that's just a raw, not pretty way to say that from a cold business perspective, that's the truth. Um, and so a lot of sports teams just feel that, we'll get a new class in here and we'll just run them to death and work them to death, and then they'll leave or they're going to leave us anyway to move on to their next opportunity. We'll get a new crop coming in here and all that kind of thing. And that may be true, but even while you're managing them, helping develop them as pros, you better spend some time on how you communicate with them about what's important to get your culture right. Slide doesn't say anything about culture, but human relations about strategically planning how your culture is going to be to get your culture right. So you get more production out of your employees. So you reach your goals. It's all about production, right? How do I get this group of people that work and get paid by us as an organization to produce in their particular area with the highest standards possible? And so it takes time and investment, takes money. And a lot of people underfund that because they don't necessarily want to connect those dots, or they're just like, I just don't want to spend that much time on it, or don't care. The truth. Um, Obviously mobile devices, and this is talking about emerging technologies, social media. Mobile devices, spelled wrong, are capable of delivering real-time content. Content is the buzzword of the century. And if you think about what that is, you know what a piece of content is: a little video, a reel, a graphic, piece of music, a meme, whatever we put out there, and we sport organizations or us as humans put out there in terms of content, what is it designed to do? Same thing as marketing. That's why content is marketing, content marketing, right? We want to customize content, but ideally, content is designed to do two things. First, get our attention, and secondly, have us engage with it. Oh, wow, that looks interesting. That's funny. He's attractive, whatever it is. It gets your attention, and then you watch it. You've consumed it. Now they want you to do something with it. Share it, forward it, like it, comment on it, right? And that speaks to technology right here, how algorithms work, all the stuff I'm sure you guys know. So why content is king. It's also why it's hard to create content that cuts through that clutter, harkening back to the first part of this particular lecture. Yes, it gives you control how your product is portrayed to the sports consumer. It absolutely gives you that control. But again, you've got to cut through the clutter. You have to create content that captures attention, is engaging. That's why all the analytics that people that do this stuff for a living are looking at what the engagement is, right? How deep is something engaged with? how did my content perform in regards to uh, people doing something on our behalf with it? And all of these are just steps toward what? I mean, think about this. Oh, great. I put this great piece of content out there and look how many likes and shares and reposts I get. Who cares? What is that supposed to do? Well, it grows your audience. Great. To do what? Purpose. To get more people engaged with your brand, with your organization, to get more invested. The more they invest emotionally, interest wise, ideally that leads to them being what? Supporters with their hard earned money. Again, that's the bottom line. It's true with any product or service. Again, we happen to be in a sport marketing and technology or a sport marketing communication class. So that's the lens in which we look at everything. But again, this is just one particular industry. Every industry is trying to do the same thing, just in different methods and different ways. Because again, they have different goals and outcomes specifically, but generally, all organizations are trying to be healthy, financially healthy, so they can do what? Hire more people, pay them, pay raises, expand. Right? I asked a son of a billionaire one time how many companies they had, or he was telling me how they had 40 companies. I'm like, God, that's a lot of companies. Like, why do you need so many companies? What's the point of all that? He's like, well, provide more jobs. And I thought that was pretty noble. The more if you have the purpose in mind that says, look, I want to acquire more companies, I want to do more things because I want to employ more people, that's good. Now that's counter to this, like, oh, I want to empower less people. I want technology to take over. Again, I advocate for more people. That's just my personal feeling about it. Companies that have to be healthy have to make hard decisions about saying, you know what, we're going to go in ways we don't want to pay people anymore. We're going to pay technology to do it. How do you really feel about that? Are you happy when you're engaging with a bot or any other kind of artificial intelligence, or when you call up and all you go through is robots that you have to talk to before you can talk to a human? I don't know about you, it drives me freaking crazy. I understand it, but it is potentially a cost-cutting measure. And I just think it's noble when people who have companies and want to buy companies and things like that do so, because of thinking the more I do, if I do things right, the more people I can hire, the more jobs I can give to people who need a way to feed themselves and feed their families and have a happy life. That's a good thing. So this touches on this, right? Technologies may be seen as a threat to the organization's standard ways of doing business. At what point does an organization say, hey, we're going to get off the human standard and get onto the technology standard? Or where's the fine line? It's all about your philosophy, all about, again, your brand. What are you trying to tell the world? What do you want the world to know? What do you think is the best way of doing things? How much money do you want, right? And even when you generate money, what are you trying to use it for? Those are questions you have to ask yourselves. Sport organizations, in my opinion, again, as you guys have heard me say, we're in the smile business. We're there to improve the quality of people's lives. The more money we get in, the more revenue we generate, ideally, the more good we can do. We can engage in more community relations activities. We can hire more people. We can add a new piece of technology in the stadium that makes our games more fun, which keeps people coming in because they have a great time. We can invest more in the latest kind of food technologies to make our food and beverage service better. Can't do anything without revenue. It's all connected. But ultimately, the point is the same. Somebody spends their time, hard-earned money walking into my building. I want them to have a great time. And then that feeds itself as good business practice because those people will come back. I don't know what the new media is going to be. I mean, think about all the streaming services we have, the pay for subscription services, augmented reality, uh, alternate reality. I'm a Star Trek fan. Star Trek: The Next Generation of the '90s had a holodeck. Is that where we're going? Where people can go pay a ticket to walk into a holodeck, even though they're hundreds of miles away from the stadium, but feel like they're sitting right there. I think that's where we're going. How is it? How is new media emerging, and what is the point of it? Engagement. But even then, for what? All technology, I believe, that humans have come up with is designed to do what? Make things better for us. A wheel, a cart, a way of farming, just anything. Anything you can think of is either make our lives easier or better. Doesn't always work, and even then, it doesn't always make us happier. But all technologies is supposed to do that, right? It's supposed to make things better for humans. We invent it to try to fix a problem we see to make things better. It's no different, right? So I don't know what all these things are going to be, but these audio, video, and written word channels, or the way we communicate, mediums that interact with digital technology, that we engage with or connect with through the moderating factor of the internet, the World Wide Web, which is exactly what we're doing right here, right now. New media should be focused on interactivity and individual consumer focus, as opposed to the broader audience approach to traditional media. That's what new media, social media marketing, allows us to do. And again, just to reemphasize, yes, it does, but also that's what everybody else does, which means that I'm not sure it's better, is what I'm getting at. Is it better to be able to focus on the consumer and play in the same space with everybody else doing the same thing? Is that any different than not being able to do that, but broadcasting and hitting the same amount of people because there's less messaging coming at us all the time? I'm just asking. I don't know. I know how I feel about it. As a musician, in the past, if you wanted to get your records out there, you had to get a record deal. Oh, I need a record deal. I need a label to sign me so that they will put up the money so I can make a recording and put out an album, and they could promote it, and I can go play concerts. Don't need any of that. You can create your own label, right? You got so much technology. I'll put my music out there. Well, that's great, right? Yeah, except for the fact now there's so much music out there. How do you cut through that? How do I get my music out there? Well, I need new technology to do that. So it's good that it's easier to create content, and that you can get it out there, but getting it out there just means everybody else is doing the same thing. So it's the same problem. It's just a different kind of problem. Same being, it's hard to cut through, hard to get your messages where you want them because there's so many messages out there. Whereas before, it's hard to get your message out there because there was few methods to get your message out there. A sports team website, of course, not considered new media. Websites have been around for decades, but a website can continue to be fresher, newer, new technology within a website. Even then, people will tell you a lot of technologies about collecting an email or driving somebody to a website, which is ultimately where we want them to land. That's why people still look at how many new page views that we have. Right? A website is a living 24-hour advertisement if you can get people to go engage with it. And it's the same thing once they get there. How do you keep them on a page? Well, what do you want them to see? How much information do you want to get them? What keeps you there? Think about it. It's very, very challenging, but it's still a repository for things that allows us as sport organizations to still use to communicate to the fans when we know that they're right where we want them to be because they came there looking for us. Question is, how do we hold them? Where do we direct them to? What are we trying to get them to do? Right? How do we lower the hurdle for participation? Right? In terms of call to action and buying something, I don't want something. If you have to buy a ticket, you have to do 12 clicks. I need about 2 or 3. Right? That's what everybody's trying to do. Come up with new media, new technologies to figure out, hey, that's why Amazon is so good. What, I've already get in there. No, look at that. Hit a button, and boom, its purchase will be here in 2 days. Amazing. It's that ease of purchase. It's the convenience we're all looking for. Websites have to do the same thing. Right? Media technology is about convenience, making our lives easier. I didn't say better, easier. Technically, easier should make it better, but again, we can debate that. What are other forms that we use through this sort of technological focus or sphere? Blogs, podcasts, and blog is kind of an old term. I don't know how many people blog anymore, but which is of course short for web log, World Wide Web log, journal. There's things like Substack. There's things like Patreon. All different ways where people can tell their story, write. Podcasts are very, very popular one because they're mobile. You can listen to them anytime. It's appointment listening. Easily digestible, easy to produce. But again, that just means there's a lot of podcasting content out there. I think people that are interested in blog are more invested in a way that those that are good bloggers do so in a way just like a good script writer would for a television series. Hey, I'm going to write something, but I want you to come back tomorrow and read, or next week, or whenever your frequency is, because I've got something that I have held earlier, and you can't wait to see what they're going to say next. You can't wait to watch the next episode. That's the same thing with podcast series, but in blogging is the same way, right? But anyway, these are just all technological tools and means and methods to communicate, get your messages out there, reach particular audiences. and have them engage with you in a deeper way, which everybody says in science ways. If you engage deeper, there's more investment. They become a stronger stakeholder. And if you do the right things and hold on to that, that can pay dividends for you as an organization, because of course you want more customers and people that love you and your brand and what you do. Keeps you healthy, your business healthy. What's social networking? You ever see that movie, right? Pretty good movie, actually, about Facebook and the founding of Facebook. But social networking is a collection of individuals share connections. Uh, and of course, these are, gosh, Facebook groups. Again, I'm thinking about technology. People who use Pinterest or Etsy or all these different groups that think about all the groups that you belong to on Facebook, those that you have Facebook, and people may not have them, but all the people that you follow, let's say on Instagram, do you tend to follow artists? Do you tend to follow musicians? Do you tend to follow athletes? Do you tend to follow what your interests are? And within that, people who share that same interest create their own social network and they exchange ideas and thoughts and feelings. Well, ideally, how does a sport organization tap into that? Or how do they create their own social network where people are talking about them and what they do, right? Storytelling, engagement, characters, so important. Facebook, Instagram, and X, obviously, the most common, formerly Twitter, and new emerging technologies. Obviously, YouTube's been around. I continue to read that YouTube is as powerful, more powerful than any of them. You guys maybe could vouch for that. How often you look for content on YouTube and watch YouTube? Boy, I can tell you, I've got full educations on how to fix my car on YouTube. It's an invaluable thing, and thank goodness for people who create those videos. It's a really, really cool thing. I'm not on TikTok, but I understand its power. Again, that's about content and engagement. It's interesting, and it definitely works. And I don't know what's coming up. You guys maybe know some of these emerging technologies. What's TikTok hot for? I mean, think about some of the things in the past that were hot. Oh gosh, what was it one? It's not even popular anymore. But you could probably think of some that sort of came and they were fad and they were hot and they're gone. Snapchat is around. MySpace used to be around years ago before you guys were born. It predated Facebook. Watch The Social Network. You'll understand what I'm talking about there. So my point is, whatever's popular now might not be popular tomorrow or next week. People are out there right now trying to invent ways to disrupt this so that they can create their own audiences and deliver messages and generate income from that. So where is this stuff going to come from? A lot of smart people in the world. It blows my mind how incredibly talented we have human beings to create things like this that are just completely, heck, I can't explain. I don't know how radio works. I don't know how television works. I mean, I know how it works, but you want to explain to me how you can transmit pictures through fiber and put it on this little piece of plastic? I mean, it's just fascinating, right? It just blows my mind. So a lot of smart people out there in the world doing this. This is our last slide. So again, I'll try to create the quiz over this chapter and lecture and the previous one on sponsorship and get that posted as quickly as possible. And again, try to catch up on grading as quickly as possible as well. So please be patient with me. If you have any questions, go ahead and text me, and I'll answer as quick as I can. And until then, we'll talk to you then. Thanks for watching, and be good.